When Mama passed away, the house went quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. She had always been the heartbeat of our home, the reason laughter echoed down the hallways. Without her, even the ticking clock seemed too loud. My sister Lena and I stood side by side in our black dresses, both of us too young to wear that much grief. Family and church members filled the living room, murmuring prayers, bringing casseroles, and whispering, "She's in a better place now." But I couldn't hear any of it. All I could think was that she was gone, and nothing would ever fit right again. A week later, Daddy called me into his home office. The air smelled faintly of cigar smoke and old books. He sat behind his desk, his shoulders slumped, his skin pale beneath the lamplight. On the table lay 2 envelopes, plain white, sealed, and heavy with something that felt more like destiny than paper. "Imani," he said quietly, his voice rough from sleepless nights. "Your mother left behind some plans. Promises she made before she got sick." "Plans?" I asked, frowning. He hesitated before pushing the envelopes toward me. "One for you. One for your sister. She made arrangements for both of you, too," his voice faltered. "To marry." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "Marry." He nodded slowly, eyes full of a sadness that didn't soften the blow. "Your mother arranged it before she passed. She believed she was securing your futures." My stomach twisted. "With who?" He opened the first envelope. "Lena will marry into the Benson family. They own several tech firms in Atlanta. Wealthy, influential people. It's a good match for her." He placed the second envelope in front of me. "And you'll be joining the Carver family down in Maplewood, a small farming town a few hours south." I stared at him in disbelief. Why would she do that? Why send me to Maplewood while Lena stays in Atlanta? He rubbed his temples, sighing. "Because, Imani, you've always been the strong one. You can handle a harder life. Lena's softer. She needs security. You'll make it anywhere." "She might not." Those words burned like acid. Strong one. Softer one. I'd heard them my whole life. It was the family's polite way of saying Lena was the favorite, and I was the reliable backup. "So she gets skyscrapers and you give me soil?" I snapped. He looked up sharply. "Watch your tone. Your mother wanted what was best. And what's decided is decided." I wanted to argue, to scream, to burn those envelopes right there on his desk. But his eyes told me it wouldn't change a thing. His grief had turned to stone, and there was no breaking through. That night, I lay awake listening to Lena sob softly in the next room. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe she was sad to leave home. But all I felt was the familiar sting of being the one expected to endure, to be strong for everyone else. Morning came too soon. The house buzzed with activity, movers carrying suitcases, relatives offering advice we didn't ask for. Lena looked radiant in her cream-colored dress, her nails done, curls pinned perfectly, the diamond necklace Daddy had gifted her glinting at her throat. She looked like she was walking into a magazine spread. Me. I had a small duffel and a single rolling suitcase. No jewelry. No designer heels. Just jeans, boots, and a cardigan too plain for pictures. As I carried my bag down the stairs, Lena leaned against the railing, smirking. "You sure you're ready for that country life, sis? I heard they got more cows than people down there." I clenched my jaw. "At least I won't have to fake a smile for the cameras." She laughed. "Please. While you're out there milking goats, or whatever they do, I'll be dining at the Bensons' penthouse. Maybe I'll send you one of my old dresses, if the mud hasn't swallowed you whole by then." Her words sliced through me, but I said nothing. Daddy stood behind her, expression unreadable. 2 cars waited in the driveway. One sleek black SUV with tinted windows, the other an old pickup borrowed from a family friend. Lena climbed into the SUV like a queen entering her throne room. I dragged my bag toward the truck. Daddy kissed her cheek, then turned to me. His lips brushed the top of my head. "Be strong, Imani." I wanted to ask him why strength always had to mean sacrifice, but I just nodded and climbed in. As the truck pulled away from the city, I caught a glimpse of Lena's smile through her tinted window, triumphant, confident, certain. She was heading toward glitter and glass towers. I was heading toward dirt roads and silence. Neither of us knew it then, but one of us was about to lose her freedom, and the other was about to find it. The ride to Maplewood took almost 4 hours. City lights faded into long stretches of trees, the roads narrowing until even the GPS lost signal. The air grew thicker, scented with pine and red clay. When the truck finally stopped, we weren't in front of a mansion or even a paved driveway, just a narrow dirt road leading to a cluster of small houses under a wide, endless sky. "This is the end of the road, ma'am," the driver said, setting my luggage beside me. I stood there, dust rising around my boots, wondering if this was really my new beginning or the end of everything I'd known. A woman approached from one of the porches, a tall, sturdy figure with skin the color of roasted coffee and eyes that looked both tired and kind. She wore denim overalls and a headscarf tied neatly at the back. "You must be Imani," she said with a warm smile. "I'm Mrs. Carver, Thomas's mama. Been waiting on you." Her voice was rich and calm, the kind that could steady a storm. Before I could protest, she lifted my duffel with one arm like it weighed nothing. "Come on, sweetheart. Thomas will be home soon from the fields." The Carver home was small but alive, music from a radio humming softly in the kitchen, the smell of cornbread baking in the oven, sunlight pouring through lace curtains. It wasn't luxury, but it felt safe. "Sick baby," Mrs. Carver said, brushing her hands on her apron. "You look worn out. You won't lift a thing today. Tomorrow, Thomas will show you round." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. That night, I sat out on the porch as the sun disappeared beyond the trees. Fireflies blinked in the yard like tiny sparks of gold, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. The next morning, I met Thomas. He walked in from the fields just after sunrise, tall and broad-shouldered, his t-shirt clinging to skin bronzed by the sun. His hands were rough, his boots caked with dirt, but when he smiled, it was soft and genuine. "Sorry I wasn't here when you arrived," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Didn't want to keep you waiting, but I had to finish up before the heat hit." "It's okay," I murmured, caught off guard by his calmness. He nodded toward the porch. "You hungry?" Mama made breakfast. That was the first meal I'd shared with the Carvers. Grits, biscuits, scrambled eggs, and laughter that rolled easy. No fancy dishes, no polite silence. Just warmth. That afternoon, I got a letter from Lena. The envelope was scented like expensive perfume. "Imani, you wouldn't believe this place. The Benson's home looks like a hotel. There are people who pour my coffee before I even ask. They address me as Mrs. Benson now. The dining table could fit our whole church. I suppose your chickens are keeping you company down there in Maplewood." Her words shimmered with pride, but I could feel the edge beneath them. I folded the letter and slid it into my journal. For the first time, I didn't feel jealous. Days turned to weeks. Life here was simple, but full. Thomas taught me things I'd never imagined learning. How to tell when soil was ready to plant, how to gather eggs without cracking a single shell, how to tell a storm was coming just by the smell of the air. At first, I stumbled, dropped tools, got blisters, and tripped over everything. But Thomas never once raised his voice. He'd just grin and say, "Don't worry, you'll get it. You ain't gotta be perfect here." Those words hit something deep inside me. I'd spent my whole life trying to be perfect. It was strange and freeing not to be. Evenings became my favorite time of day. We'd all sit outside, the Carvers, their neighbors, sometimes even the preacher's wife, just talking, laughing, passing bowls of peach cobbler or sweet tea around. Out here, the stars were so clear it felt like the sky had cracked open. Lena's letters came less often. The ones that did arrive started to change. "Imani," they correct everything I do. How I sit, how I talk, even how I laugh. They say a Benson wife should be refined, but I feel like I'm being carved into something I don't recognize. "I'm tired." I read that one twice, then folded it gently and slipped it beside the others. For the first time, I pitied her. By the time summer rolled in, Maplewood had started to feel like home. The air hummed with cicadas and the scent of sweetgrass. I woke early most mornings, helping Mrs. Carver with breakfast before Thomas headed out to the fields. He'd always smile at me before leaving, simple, quiet, and real. There was something in his presence that grounded me, like I could finally exhale after years of holding my breath. One afternoon, he came back early, his hands covered in dust and calluses, his eyes thoughtful. "There's something I want to show you," he said. We walked down the road to where a group of men were shoveling gravel. The old dirt path that led through town had been half washed away by rain. "Last week," he explained. "Old Mr. Jacobs collapsed out there. Took us near an hour to get the ambulance through. The road's too rough, too narrow. So I'm fixin' it. With your own money?" I asked, startled. He nodded. "If we wait on the county, folks'll suffer. I got some savings. Ain't much, but it'll do." I looked at him, sweat streaking his face, his hand steady on the shovel, and realized I was looking at the kind of strength that didn't need to announce itself. That night, while we sat on the porch sipping sweet tea, I said softly, "You're spending everything you have for a road." He smiled. "What's money worth if you can't use it to make life easier for people?" The next morning, the whole community joined in. Men, women, even kids came to help. I cooked meals for the workers, carried bottled water and sandwiches out to the road, and watched as something beautiful happened. Neighbors who'd barely spoken in years laughed and sang together while they worked. By the time the sun set, sweat glistened on every brow, but spirits were high. For the first time, I felt like I was a part of something that truly mattered. That night, another letter arrived from Lena. The handwriting was shaky this time. "Imani, I don't know how long I can do this. Everything I wear, say, or eat has to be approved. I thought I'd be treated like a queen, but I'm just another decoration in their house. I can't even leave the gate without permission. You're the lucky one, even if you don't realize it." I read it by lamplight, the words trembling in my hands. I could almost see her, dressed in silk but suffocating underneath it. In Maplewood, my hands were blistered, my clothes smelled of soil, and my hair was never perfect, but I could breathe. A few days later, Thomas came home carrying a small wooden box. "For you," he said quietly, passing it into my hands. Inside was a bracelet made of polished walnut beads, strung together with a single golden charm. "It ain't fancy," he said, scratching his neck, "but I made it myself, so you'd have something to remind you that you ain't alone out here." I looked up at him, my eyes stinging. "Thomas, it's beautiful." He shrugged, smiling that small, shy smile of his. "Beautiful's what you make it." When the new road finally opened, the whole town came to celebrate. Kids raced their bikes down the smooth pavement, the church choir sang from the back of a pickup truck, and for once, Maplewood felt like a place the world hadn't forgotten. As I watched Thomas laughing with the other men, covered in dust and pride, something inside me shifted. I had come here unwilling, angry, and afraid, but now, looking at him, I knew I had found something Lena never could, freedom. That night, as the stars blazed above us, I whispered to myself, "This is what love looks like." Months passed, and the road Thomas built stood like a ribbon of promise through Maplewood. Children played on it every evening, their laughter echoing across the fields. People from neighboring towns came to see it, calling it Carver Road in his honor. He brushed off the praise, of course. That was Thomas, humble, always putting others before himself. One quiet evening, while Mrs. Carver and I were cooking, a truck pulled into the yard. It wasn't one of the neighbors. The paint gleamed too perfectly, the tires too new. I stepped outside, wiping my hands on my apron, and froze. It was Lena, but not the Lena I remembered. Gone was the radiant woman who twirled in designer heels and boasted about penthouses. She wore a beige trench coat, her makeup too thick to hide the dark circles under her eyes. Even her posture had changed, stiff, like someone who'd forgotten what he's felt like. "Lena!" I whispered. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, sis." I led her inside. Mrs. Carver poured her a glass of lemonade and quietly left us alone. Lena sat at the table, her manicured fingers trembling against the glass. "I didn't know where else to go," she said softly. "I just needed to breathe." I studied her face. "What happened?" She gave a short, humorless laugh. "What hasn't?" Her voice cracked. "Imani, I'm trapped. Every day I wake up and pretend to be someone I'm not. My husband watches everything I do, who I talk to, how long I'm out, even what I post online. If I say I'm unhappy, he tells me I'm ungrateful. If I cry, he calls me dramatic. They say I'm lucky, but I feel like I'm disappearing." Her words sank heavy into the small kitchen. I thought of the way she used to laugh, loud and full, and how I hadn't heard it once since she walked in. "I can't remember the last time I made a decision for myself," she continued. The house is full of people, but I've never felt so alone. And you? She looked around the room, at the simple shelves, the smell of cornbread baking, the hum of the radio. You laugh here. You wake up without fear. You're surrounded by people who love you for who you are. Look at me, dressed in gold, living in a mansion, and I'd trade it all just to feel like myself again. I reached across the table, taking her trembling hands. Lena, I tried to tell you back then, what looks like more can end up being less. Tears welled in her eyes, slipping past the mascara. I know, she whispered. I thought you were the one losing. Turns out, you were the only one who won. Silence filled the space between us. For the first time, there was no jealousy, only understanding. Outside, I could hear Thomas hammering something in the shed, whistling softly. That simple sound made Lena smile faintly through her tears. He loves you, doesn't he? She said. I nodded. In the quiet way that matters. Her eyes softened. You're lucky, Imani. No, I said gently. I'm just free. Lena looked away, her shoulders shaking as the truth hit her. The pearls she wore glimmered in the light, beautiful, but heavy, like chains. The next morning, I found Lena sitting on the porch swing wrapped in one of Mrs. Carver's knitted blankets. The sunrise painted gold streaks across the fields, and for the first time in years, her face looked soft, almost peaceful. I didn't sleep much, she said quietly as I stepped outside. But for once, I wasn't scared to close my eyes. Stay as long as you need, I told her. No one here's rushing you back to anything. She nodded, but her eyes were heavy with something I couldn't name. Days went by. She helped Mrs. Carver shell peas, and sometimes joined Thomas in the garden. Slowly, her laughter began to return, hesitant at first, like a bird testing its wings. Then, one afternoon, her husband showed up. The shiny black car pulled up like it didn't belong in this world, chrome glinting, tires spotless, windows tinted too dark. When he stepped out, everything about him screamed control, crisp suit, polished shoes, a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Lena, he said smoothly, you've been gone long enough. Her whole body tensed. I just needed some time. You've embarrassed our family. His voice was calm, but the thread underneath it was sharp. Get in the car. Thomas stepped forward, his tone steady. Sir, she doesn't have to go anywhere she doesn't want to. The man turned to him with a smirk. And who are you supposed to be? I'm her sister's husband, Thomas said. And this here's her sister's home. She's safe. For a moment, I thought there'd be a fight. The air was so tight you could hear the wind hesitate. But Lena lifted her chin. I'm not going with you, she said. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. He laughed quietly, like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Don't be ridiculous, Lena. I said no. He took a step forward, but Thomas moved between them before I even realized it. For a long second, no one breathed. Then the man's jaw tightened, and he turned away, muttering something under his breath as he got back into his car. We stood in silence, watching the vehicle speed down the road until it vanished behind the trees. Lena's legs gave out, and I caught her before she hit the ground. She buried her face in my shoulder, shaking. I didn't think I could do that, she whispered. You just did, I said softly. That's the first real choice you've made in a long time. After that day, she stayed with us for weeks. No deadlines, no expectations. The color slowly came back into her cheeks. She'd walk barefoot through the fields, laugh at the chickens chasing each other, and hum old songs Mama used to sing. One night, we sat under the stars, just the two of us, a jar of fireflies between us like a small galaxy. Remember when I said you got the lesser life? She asked, smiling faintly. I laughed. Yeah, you were mean that day. She nodded. Turns out I was wrong. You got the life Mama wanted for both of us, one that's real. I squeezed her hand. You can still have it, Lena. Maybe not like this. Maybe not in Maplewood, but in your own way. She exhaled, long and slow, then leaned her head on my shoulder. I think I will. Months later, she moved to a small apartment back in the city, not the Benson's glass tower, but her own space. She started teaching art classes for kids, painting again for the first time in years. Her texts were lighter, her voice freer. Sometimes she'd visit, bringing stories of the children she taught and pictures of their messy little masterpieces. Each time, She'd hug Thomas and Mrs. Carver like family. And me. I stayed here. My hands still bore calluses. My hair still smelled faintly of cornfields and sun, but I never wished for anything else. One evening, while Thomas and I sat on the porch, I watched the fireflies blink across the field and thought of Mama's words, how she used to say, "The world will always measure you by what shines, but peace don't need to sparkle to be golden." Lena had found her way to that truth the hard way. And so had I, because in the end, freedom doesn't come wrapped in gold or sealed in an envelope. It's something you build with your own hands, one road, one choice, one breath at a time.